Welcome to our Holmes History Lecture Series. My name is Caroline Barton, and I am an online history instructor with Holmes Community College. I will be giving you a short lecture on Alexander the Great for your Western Civilization 1 class. Please pay close attention to the information in this lecture. There will be a quiz at the end of this video. In 338 BC, King Philip II of Macedonia conquered the Greeks at Chaeronea. This decisive charge that won the battle was led by his 18-year-old son, Alexander. Philip II then formed the League of Corinth with the purpose to attack the Persian Empire. He was assassinated in 336 BC, and his son Alexander became king. He was 20 years old. Alexander the Great was born in July 356 in Pella, Greece. He was tutored as a young man by Aristotle and very famously met Diogenes later in life. A few key points about him. One is that he never lost a battle in 15 years of conquest. He ultimately named 70 cities for himself throughout Asia and North Africa, and one for his horse, Bucephalus. And of course, he died of unknown causes in June 323 in Babylon. In 334 BC, Alexander, with his Macedonian cavalry and his Greek phalanx infantry, caused the Hellespont to attack the Persian Empire first at the Battle of Granicus River. This is an overwhelming victory for Alexander, who then proceeded to march further into the Persian Empire. A second major battle that took place between the Persian Empire and Alexander was at the Battle of Issus. This was also a significant victory for Alexander. The Persian Empire, under Darius, had begun to withdraw deeper into the heart of Asia. And so at that point, Alexander subsequently detoured through and conquered the city of Tyre and Gaza, and then went to Egypt. While in Egypt, he very famously made a detour to some of the temples at the Sawi Oasis, and then returned back to Memphis. Now, while he was visiting the temples there, Egyptian priests declared that Alexander was a god. And so, very famously from that point on, he demanded to be treated as a god. This was not a Greek thing, and many of the Greek city-states adamantly refused to address him as a god, but it was very much a Eastern philosophy, and so it was acceptable both to the Egyptians and to the Persians that he be viewed as a god. Ultimately, though, he was determined to conquer the empire, and he moved deeper into the Persian Empire and had the decisive battle at Gaugamela. Now, the Battle of Gaugamela is quite interesting. I encourage you to look at it in your textbook. Alexander the Great's army was heavily outnumbered, and yet he used a unique presentation of his infantry to defeat the much, much larger Persian army. Tactics that Alexander used at Gaugamela are still taught today throughout military history courses and, of course, to our officers. So subsequently, Alexander then moved into deeper part of Mesopotamia, and then subsequently decided that he was going to basically cross Asia until he reached the Eastern Ocean. Now, he did not quite do that, but he did go deep into the heart of Asia. He goes all the way over to Persepolis in Persia, and then he follows northward into this area of Parthia, very famously into Bactria, across the Hindu Kush Mountains, and then a little further northward, which at one point his troops absolutely refused to go any further once they reached the Indus River, and demand to return back home. Now, the interesting thing about the invasion of India is that it was not very successful for Alexander the Great as far as occupying. He won the battles, but the Indian leaders continued to attack him as he traveled along the Indus River southward. And then eventually he comes across the Rhodosian Desert, where he lost thousands of troops due to lack of water and poor food. And then he eventually returns to Babylon. Now, that was a 10-year trip, and so what we see happens is that everywhere he goes, once he conquers an area, he establishes a city, and he leaves Greek officials to govern in his stead. And a lot of his army was parsed out at different times to hold the territory. When he returned to Babylon, he was, of course, unfortunately, shortly afterward, he would die. Now, exactly what he died of, we're not for certain. He could have been, he was drinking, and there was some possibility of alcohol poisoning. There's also some suggestion that he had contracted malaria and was sick from that. He had been wounded repeatedly, and there was some possibility of old wounds causing health issues, or it could have very easily just simply been a combination of all of them, all of those issues. But so your history books like to say that it's unknown. Now, one of the things that we see that happens is that once Alexander dies, no one general or follower of his is able to hold his empire. Tradition says that as Alexander lay dying, his generals asked to whom he would leave his empire. His response was, to the strongest. And although he had married and had a child at that time, his son was only, I believe, 1 to 2 years of age. So obviously he was not going to be the next leader. And so what we see is that subsequently, after Alexander's death, that his empire will break apart. And there will be famously several sections. First, the Ptolemaic dynasty will be established by his general Ptolemy, who takes over Egypt. And then we have the Seleucid dynasty, which is here in the orange. That's a different commander that will take over. And then, of course, the Antigonid, there we go, sorry about that, that you see here, that makes up portions of Macedonia and most northern Greek city-states. And then, of course, you'll notice that there are other colors. These are independent kingdoms that did not remain under direct Greek control. The Bactria kingdom, the Indus portion of the kingdom, and many of your Greek city-states became independent again, and the League of Corinth was pulled apart. So what is most significant about Alexander the Great isn't just that he conquered most of the known world at the time and created the largest empire ever known, but that he brought Greek culture and language throughout Asia. And as a result, we enter into what's become known as the Hellenistic era. And Hellenistic refers back to the word Greek. Hellene is Greek. And so Hellenistic means to be Greek-like. And so what you get as a result of Alexander's conquering and his occupation of Asia is a significant expansion of Greek culture that merges with the various Persians, Indus, and other Egyptian cultures and so forth, all the local cultures, and it becomes Greek-like. It's not exactly a Greek culture. It is heavily influenced by the local cultures as well. And so I appreciate your attention, and I hope that you found this to be helpful.